Today we've got a great story of revenge, getting a year's worth of pay, and getting your former boss fired. We'll get into that story in a bit, but first, helped my former boss get fired. 3 years ago, I quit a job I loved because I couldn't stand the woman in charge. There were technically 2 agencies that worked together, and both executive directors are horrible. It's well known among staff that they give themselves raises every year but refuse to give other people a raise. They do very little work yet take all the credit and will even publicly shame hard-working employees. They held an hour-long meeting after I told them I couldn't possibly add any more tasks to my schedule to tell me how horrible I was and claimed I wasn't getting my work done, that I was a liar, and that I needed to put more effort into my work instead of my personal life. I had just suffered my 3rd miscarriage and was getting a lot of testing done. I put in my notice 3 days later. Their data analyst was quickly able to prove that not only was I doing all of my work, I was actually inputting data for others. We had to input proof of everything we did. 2 weeks ago, I was having a casual conversation with my boss, who just happens to be the board president for one of the agencies. He asked me why I left and informed me that 3 years later, they still haven't been able to fill my position. I told him the truth and told him that I found it very odd that the board never did an audit because it seemed obvious that the directors weren't doing their job and funds weren't being handled properly. Well, they did one last month, and one director was unavailable because she went on a month-long trip. She couldn't prove that she didn't misuse funds when it looked as though she did. She was released last week after 25 years. Not only did they claim that she misused funds, but they also felt she was faking her timesheets since she couldn't prove what hours she worked. And they felt she was misusing her authority by making her employees come into the office while she supposedly worked from home. I mean, it's nice they got fired and all, but are they just going to get away with a over 2.5 decade thank you for allowing them to get away with misusing the funds? And now for my next trick, off to Cancun I go. Beautiful Phantom 1 wrote, "About time they caught up with her. Glad you were able to facilitate the deep dive into her work ethic." Heavy sarcasm on the work ethic part of that sentence. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of revenge, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is 10 years in the making. When we were 15, a friend of mine blatantly stole my crush, full-on made out with him. I was devastated for at least 2 weeks and swore revenge. Fast forward 10 years and she's interviewed for a training contract with a legal firm in my hometown. I was a CTA by then and contacted for a character reference. Wrote a recommendation that stated, "With the notable exception of a boyfriend stealing incident aged 15, I believe the applicant to be of good character." They read it out to her in the final interview. She got the job. So after hearing that story, I can't be the only one that thinks to themselves, you held on to that for over 10 years? Revenge is revenge, but some things that happened in the year 2000 should not matter in the year 2010. Deadcord36 wrote, "Entirely too many anal retentive people here complaining? Who cares? As long as you feel satisfied, that's all that matters. It was a bit of fun, and now it's all over." This next story is changing room music. Not quite my revenge, but I was recently at the swimming pool with my toddler, and we were getting changed after swimming when a couple of preteens came in with a speaker. They kept replaying the same 2 paragraphs of this annoying song. I glanced over, and they were practicing a wee dance. Just as I started fantasizing about all the things that could happen to the speaker, my toddler started singing the alphabet song on repeat at the top of their voice. The older girls didn't appreciate the contribution to their music and cleared out pretty quickly after that. I gave my toddler a high five. I kind of equate this situation to a commercial that keeps popping up on TV that just keeps blaring the same section of song over and over again. A super common one I've heard lately is a Wingstop commercial that plays the song that goes "No Flex Zone." That commercial plays over and over and it's the same "No Flex Zone" and it just repeats that phrase over and over. It's a legitimately good song, but when you hear those 3 words 500,000 times, you get pretty sick of it. Our next story is destroyed property and revenge. Years ago, I, now 48-year-old male, used to live in far upstate New York. During the winter, snowmobiles graced the frozen landscape. My place was situated in a small town with a fairly good-sized yard. During the previous summer, I had done a ton of landscaping, $30,000 worth, with a nice fence running the length of the property. During the winter, it had snowed significantly, which left all of 3 feet of the fence, black against white, visible from the snowdrifts. One day I was approached by some people out on their snowmobiles if it was possible to cut through my lawn. I aptly replied by pointing out the fence and explaining it runs all the way around my place and there are no access points except for my driveway. They went on their way afterwards. About a week later, the snow had come again but didn't leave any drifts. I was at work and got a call from one of my neighbors telling me my fence was destroyed near the back, and there were tracks from snowmobiles. When I got home later that day, I inspected the fence and sure enough, it was true. Needless to say, over the course of the winter, more tracks kept showing up on my property. So the following summer, I invested into a better fence consisting of reinforced concrete to look like wooden fence. After the first snowfall and the next day of work, I came home to a wrecker in my driveway, picking up 6 snowmobiles that were totaled and plenty of sheriffs asking the riders why they had chosen to ride through a privately owned property. They told the officers I gave them permission, to which I replied by pointing out the no trespassing sign I had on the front of the fence. They all received tickets and their snowmobiles were confiscated. As a side note, my neighbor drove 6-foot rebar into the front of his lawn near the sidewalk, leaving just enough above the ground level to tear up the tracks on the sleds, the same time I replaced my fence. This kind of reminds me of all those stories of people who keep having their mailboxes knocked down, and they turn around and engineer the most structurally sound mailbox in existence. Only problem is I've heard in a number of places it's actually illegal to do that to your mailbox. I'm guessing because it's pretty much right on the road almost. I guess it creates too much potential for damage, whether it's on accident or on purpose trying to drive into it. Can't quite say the same thing about a fence that meets any kind of permit though. Curmudgeon wrote, reminds me of watching 3 lights dancing through our private forest trail at about 1 a.m., going way too fast for the condition of that trail. I said to my wife, I wonder if they know about the unfilled pond we dug last summer. 3, 2, 1, the lights went dark. Guess not. Snowshoed back there the next day and found red plastic, green plastic, and yellow fiberglass at the bottom of the hole. The offending neighbor never mentioned the incident. Our next story is, lie to us to get us to watch your kids? I can play dirty and so can your children. Also features weaponized baked goods. The backstory is that I have an annoying cousin, Luis, aka Poo-Covered Lou, who is heavily into competitive child raising and off-roading her 4-wheel drive in my front garden. She's no longer allowed on our property. I don't directly speak to Lou anymore, but I do speak to her mom, Auntie Dot, and my fiancé Martin is friends with Lou's husband Mike. I don't work on Thursdays, so I was still getting dressed when I heard a car and some voices. My cat sprinted off the bed and hid in the bathroom about a nanosecond before my cousin's wonder kids, 8-year-old male and 6-year-old female, burst in. I have no idea why they weren't at school. My fiancé was just behind them, looking a bit panicked, very unusual state for him. Apparently Luis had to take Auntie Dot to the hospital and urgently needed someone to look after the kids. Martin, being the compassionate soul that he is, agreed. So we spent the morning looking after the wonder kids and our own, Vampira, nearly 2-year-old female. She wants to gnaw your broccoli. Just after lunch, healthy and nutritious, Martin tried ringing Lou to get a progress report. No answer. No biggie, they were in a hospital. But he thought he would try ringing Lou's husband Mike to see if he had heard anything. Turned out Mike had no idea the kids were with us. They were supposed to be with his mum. The hospital visit was an outpatient clinic for Luis, not an urgent trip for Auntie Dot as implied. Auntie Dot was there for moral support. Mike offered to come and collect the wonder kids, but since he's self-employed and was working on a site about 2 hours away, we agreed to keep the wonder kids for the rest of the day. Mike rang back and said Luis would collect the kids at 5 p.m. I was fuming. Poo-Covered Lou had lied and taken advantage and managed to worm her way back in. So I decided to play dirty. Literally. I took the wonder kids for a walk to the park, while Martin took our youngest to do some shopping. It was a nice winter's day and the kids ran around, fell over, climbed on all the play equipment, jumped in all the muddy puddles and found a heap of treasures and put them in their pockets to show their mom. We did wash faces and hands afterwards and cleaned shoes as best as we could, but Lou hadn't provided a change of clothing. So by the time she arrived at 6 p.m., On time for her, the Wonder Kids were tired, happy, hungry, and absolutely filthy and keen to show off their treasures. Louise, on the other hand, was not happy and made the Wonder Kids leave their treasures on the nature strip, dirtying their hands again. Then, when the kids were strapped into their car seats, it was time to enact the final part of my petty revenge. Martin produced the shopping I'd asked him to get and gave them a paper bag each. I explained they were a little treat for the journey home to tide them over. Inside each bag was a sweet bun, known in our house as instant diabetes. They are filled with strawberry jam, iced with gooey pink icing, and liberally dusted with desiccated coconut. According to my dad, by the time they reached home, the Wonder Kids were covered in jam and icing as well as dirt, and they didn't want dinner. My kids ate their veggies, Lou. The back seat of Lou's car was also covered in dirty, sticky fingerprints and coconut. Apparently, Lou's not happy, and even though she's vacuumed, she's still finding little shreds of coconut in the back seat. And oh dearie me, so sad. We're never allowed to look after her kids ever again. Ever. You know, one of the funniest things about this story is OP probably gave those kids one of the most fun days they've had in a while. Martin Glow wrote, "Have you ever heard of caffeine-enhanced chocolate? I used to be on my cousin's emergency list for her grandkids. She thought they were angels. She was wrong. After I told her they had no respect for closed doors or any area explicitly designated as off-limits, and she refused to back me up on that multiple times, they need to explore and discover without limits," she said. I bought 3 boxes, yes, boxes, of different caffeinated chocolate, and left 3 bars in one of the off-limits rooms in my house, in my own dresser drawer. She called at 11:30 p.m. after picking them up at 10 o'clock. Our agreement was 8:30, asking why they were so awake. I told her they'd told me that she herself had told them not to worry about my limits about their access to my own home. I told her that even after telling them anything they ate at my house that I did not give them might not be good for them, they entered a forbidden area and stole from me. Good luck. They each had 150 milligrams of caffeine, and I was done babysitting permanently. Family Grapevine says that they were active until 5:30 a.m. I've not been asked to babysit the jerk side of the family since. The good cousins have no worries about me and their kids or grandkids. Respect is respect. Our next story is Break Our Speed Gates? Challenge accepted. When I was a kid, my family lived on a private dead-end road with many families also raising school-age children. The street was peaceful and safe for kids to play, but every now and then driving-age teens and young adults would speed down our road, concerning the parents about their children's safety. After some time, the homeowners on the road agreed to put up 2 staggered barriers to act like speed gates, forcing motorists to reduce their speed as they weave to enter and exit the road. My dad is a frugal DIY kinda guy and volunteered to build the barricades himself and be reimbursed by the road association rather than buying pre-built, lower quality barriers. My dad's barricades were constructed using hollow plastic beams with a 2D plastic picket fence attached to the front and a weighted bottom to prevent blowing over in windy conditions. All was good in the hood until one day the light barricades were found mangled to the point of being a total loss. No one on the street knew what happened, and the street asked my dad to rebuild his barricades, so he did. A few weeks later, the barricades were again destroyed, and it became clear that it wasn't an accident, but likely caused by one of the speeding teens. Well, my dad, being an engineer, understood the assignment and doubled down, building 2 new picketed barricades, but this time reinforced every structural part with hardy 4x4 wooden beams hidden inside the plastic beams. As predicted, a few days later we found one of the barricades tipped over with a few broken picket prongs, but all in all still intact. We don't know who it was or how much damage they caused to their vehicle by ramming the reinforced gates, but that was the last time they ever tried destroying our barricades. I mean, even if it initially looks breakable with your car, what kind of moron is just going to drive straight into this thing, hoping that it breaks? Realistically, what were they expecting to happen after it gets built back up? Is the natural thing not to reinforce it further? Though I guess if the person had any kind of brain, they wouldn't be ramming into it to begin with. Neighborhood Dry 1730 wrote, "As a young farm kid, I was mad at the semi-trucks using our road. They never slowed down, they were overweight, and were supposed to use the road 2 miles over. One day I decided to take matters into my own little hands. I would lay small tree branches and mud down on the road. As the big trucks passed, I would sneak out with more mud and branches to make higher bumps. When my dad came home, he questioned out of the 6 of us kids who did it. I played dumb and Dad had to use the front end loader to scrape the speed bumps down. Our next story is, got to completely freak out my dad. This happened many years ago, but I still laugh when I think about it. My mom died when I was a teenager, and my father started dating not long after. He assumed we would be upset. So for some reason, he thought the best way to handle it was to shock us. He met with my sister and his new girlfriend and proceeded to tell her how they have great sex. My sister was disgusted but was able to keep a straight face and immediately called to warn me because I was next. Sat down with them in a restaurant and sure enough, my dad starts to tell me how they were having sex. She was a nice woman. I liked her a lot, and she was obviously so embarrassed by this. Before he had a chance to even finish his sentence, I said, "That's great. I had amazing sex just last night too." I proceeded to describe it in very graphic detail, bodily fluids and all. My father turned beet red and yelled, "I don't want to hear about that." I replied, "Guess what? Neither do I." His girlfriend laughed so hard, wine shot out of her nose. They ended up getting married, and this is our favorite story to tell on holidays, much to my father's chagrin. All I got to say is, honestly, I would be more concerned if OP did want to hear about it. Azient wrote, "Years ago I had my period and quietly told my mother that I had bad cramps that day. My brother came up and asked what we were talking about, to which we both replied, 'You don't want to know.' He persisted until I explained to him in graphic detail exactly what we were talking about. He then slammed his hands over his ears, screamed, 'Why would you tell me that? I didn't want to know that. Why didn't you just say I didn't want to know?' Our mother was collapsed in the corner of the kitchen on the floor in hysterics. Brother was on the opposite side of the kitchen, hands over ears trying to climb the cupboards away from me, and me just calmly listing off the biological function my body was performing between the two. Brother learned that if I told him he didn't want to know something, he best not push. Our next story is, slept with your ex literal days after I tell you I love you? No, I don't want the ceramic coffee mug you bought me for Father's Day. I was dating this girl for a little while. I have kids, she has kids, and it was all good for quite a while. She did tell me right off the bat that she still lives with her ex for financial reasons. Neither of them could afford to move out and she wants nothing to do with him. I did tell her I was a little uncomfortable about it and a little jealous, but I've been there before with my kid's mom, so I decided to trust her. I know, silly me. Last week, she came over to my house on Friday and stayed the night and left to go to her niece's birthday party wearing my coat. While she was here, I told her that I loved her and she said it back. Then she went out with her friend to the bar Saturday night and then came back to my house and cuddled up next to me in bed. Sunday morning she left and really didn't talk to me a whole lot. She said she felt bad after she went to the bar but wouldn't elaborate why. Not like she was hungover, like she didn't feel good about herself. And I told her that she deserved to cut loose every now and then, before correcting me saying that she had fun, but then dropped the conversation. I was kind of getting tired of carrying the conversation and being told she didn't want to talk about what was bothering her, so I went to bed. The next day she told me she did something bad and that she wanted to avoid me until it all blew over. Obviously, I poked and prodded until she told me what it was, and she said she wanted to talk to me about it in person, but I told her it was a bad idea. And she finally admitted she slept with her ex. It had nothing to do with the bar, but she needed male validation and it felt like I didn't care after I went to bed and that she was so sorry, she's moving back in with her mom and that I could have the code to her phone. I told her that she told me I had nothing to worry about, and yet she jumped on his you-know-what the second I got tired of carrying the conversation. So I wanted my coat back and that she should drop it off when I wasn't home. She did, and she left a mug that she bought me for Father's Day, as well as a letter telling me again how sorry she was and that she didn't want to lose me. The worst part is that I liked the mug, but the thought of her with him filled me with blind rage. So I smashed it, put it in a box, wrote her name on it, and tossed it into her front yard. No, I'm not going to forgive you for sleeping with an ex that you swore I had nothing to worry about, the same one who you fight with constantly and talk bad about at every turn. I'm not coming back. I don't want your dang mug. I sincerely hope you feel like crap over the whole thing. Edit, looks like she found the package. I got a text from her that says, broken heart emoji, I'm sorry. I freaking mean it. I freaking hate myself enough as it is. You really didn't have to drop the mug smashed up in the middle of my yard. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I've hated myself every freaking second since. I'm sorry. I want to make it up to you. I didn't mean for it to sound like I was blaming you. None of it was your fault. I'm sorry. I'm truly deeply sorry, OP. To which I replied, go freak a cactus, before blocking her number and all of her socials. Thanks, everyone. There's the smallest part of me that would have some level of pity for them after their mountain of, I hate myself after this, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah. But ultimately, in the end, what they did and how quickly they did it, I would have the same exact reply as OP, go freak a cactus. Like their text would kind of just leave me feeling sorry for their existence at that point. Big Max wrote, imagine dating someone where you have to be at your best every single day of your life, or she's going to go have sex with other guys. I had a tough day at work, honey. I'm just going to chill and watch TV. Okay, I'll head out to have sex with my ex. Our next story is, fired from my job, but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200 USD, and in those days there were not that many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85 3 to 10 minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. This meant that I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music, they were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing, all of which I had to use my own equipment and software because their cameras and computers were so old, they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080p. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month. However, one day when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it, and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times, the list goes on. But I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office, where I saw my manager putting on her best displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work, and it was already halfway through the year, and I'd only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I'd been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week over 60 hours just to do what needed to be done, and that being a one-man army made things impossible. And also the fact that the videos I'd put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how they would even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now. My manager had snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry, manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources. And I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database, as my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So, I changed the contact numbers and messed up all of the emails on all of the entries except one. The one, I had a friend working as a junior director. Not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him of my plan. and sure enough, within 2 days, they were called to come in to pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit. Somehow understanding the needs and style of the university as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house back then was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function. Producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary. And I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday, and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended here and I'd gotten back at my former bosses, but to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out that I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the university. The content creation project which I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about 1.5 years of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she had thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so that she could show my director that she had completed the project, and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house, and 1 year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. This makes me think of people who work and deal with animation, especially on social media. The amount of people who look at something like that, like creating a quality YouTube product, especially 85 quality YouTube videos, or even like I was mentioning, even like a 10-second animation, and expect to get it A, fast, and B, insanely cheap, is actually mind-boggling. Mystery wrote, "I work for a company that feels they need to make a video for everything. There are teams who are like, we need to make a 2-minute video about X and need it completed and looking professional in a week. I always have to tell them 3 months minimum because they suck at reviewing and approving on a timely basis. Not to mention that video development isn't magic. One team ended up buying licenses to an AI video creator and was like, look, we can make videos in an hour instead of months. Good for you and your creepy avatar thing. Glad you're now able to make more crappy video content that no one will watch because you share it once and claim success." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.